For more than 3 decades, controversy has never ceased surrounding the figure of Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei. He is not viewed merely as a religious jurist or a political ruler, but rather as a figure whose influential word is translated into religious, political, and social positions that attract the attention of both domestic and international audiences alike. His religious rulings, Fatwas, have not been limited to traditional issues such as ritual purity and acts of worship. Instead, they have extended to major and sensitive files, including nuclear weapons, international politics, and delicate issues such as Sunni-Shia unity. They also touch upon details of everyday life, such as women riding bicycles, the ruling on chess, music, ritual self-flagellation, tatbir, and tattoos. This intertwining of jurisprudence, politics, and media has turned Khamenei's fatwas into provocative material in which official texts become mixed with reports circulated by news agencies and social media platforms, making it sometimes difficult to distinguish between what was actually issued and what is merely a narrative or a rumor. In this video, we will take viewers on a structured chronological journey through the most controversial fatwas, placing them within their jurisprudential and social contexts, and revealing the difference between documented texts and what has spread through the media. So stay with us until the end, and don't forget to support us by liking the video and subscribing to the channel to receive all our latest content. It can be said that the chronological trajectory of the public fatwas issued by Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, reflects clear shifts between major national security issues and the details of everyday social life that directly affect people. These milestones, documented in official sermons and verified texts, form a comprehensive picture of the nature of religious and political authority in Iran. In his Eid al-Fitr sermon on July 18, 2015, Khamenei stated unequivocally that the production, stockpiling, and use of nuclear weapons are religiously forbidden, haram. This statement was not a passing remark. Rather, it became a foundational pillar repeatedly cited by Iran in its international files. It was framed as a binding religious ruling prohibiting nuclear weapons, which made Iran's position appear internally coherent in its rejection of nuclear armament on religious and ethical grounds. This stance went beyond Iran's domestic sphere and became an integral part of its nuclear policy on the global stage. On October 7, 2010, another fatwa was issued with a highly sensitive sectarian and social dimension. Khamenei affirmed the prohibition of insulting Lady Aisha or any revered figures of the Sunni community, declaring this matter a red line that must not be crossed. He warned that such practices open the door to discord and deepen divisions within the Islamic nation. This fatwa was widely welcomed among Sunni scholars, and many viewed it as a practical step toward sectarian rapprochement, to the extent that it was described as one of the most prominent fatwas promoting Islamic unity issued by the Iranian leadership. However, the same period witnessed a different kind of controversy when a religious inquiry appeared in September 2016 concerning women riding bicycles in public spaces. The text clarified that a woman riding a bicycle in public streets and in the presence of non-mahram men is not religiously permissible. This ruling was based on the jurisprudential principle of blocking the means, sad al-darai, rather than an absolute prohibition, contrary to how it was portrayed in the media. Nevertheless, the fatwa sparked widespread debate about the boundaries of personal freedom and the concept of modesty within Iranian society. On June 13, 2019, Khamenei once again reaffirmed his nuclear fatwa during his meeting with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, emphasizing that the construction of nuclear weapons is forbidden by a religious decree. This statement further strengthened the presence of the fatwa in international forums and gave it a clear diplomatic dimension, as it began to be cited as evidence of Iran's declared commitment to a peaceful approach, thus merging religious authority with political diplomacy. Among the most prominent issues that have sparked wide debate in the fatwas of Ali Khamenei are those related to religious rituals, the arts, and games. Although these fields may appear unrelated, they collectively reveal a jurisprudential logic based on reclassifying practices according to two central criteria: obedience and discord. With regard to music and singing, Khamenei draws a distinction between singing associated with amusement and licentiousness, which is prohibited both in performance and in listening, and music that is free from such characteristics, which he considers unobjectionable. As a result, the ruling becomes dependent on context and intention rather than an absolute judgment. These fatwas gained particular prominence in debates surrounding female singing and the boundaries of what is considered provocative or morally corrupting. In the case of chess, the ruling evolved from an absolute prohibition to a conditional permissibility. Khamenei holds that the game is no longer regarded as an instrument of gambling in the modern era, and is therefore permissible as long as it is played without wagering. Nevertheless, the underlying principle remains unchanged. Anything that falls under the category of gambling remains strictly forbidden. Away from strategic and large-scale political matters, the fatwas of Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, extend into precise details of women's everyday lives. On the issue of looking at one's fiancée, he permits a prospective groom to look at her without her customary hijab for the purpose of making a marriage decision, provided that this occurs only once and without any intention of pleasure. This ruling was seen as a departure from the rigid perception commonly associated with hijab regulations. Regarding modesty and covering, Khamenei emphasized that it is not permissible for a woman to expose her ankles in front of non-mahram men, thereby explicitly adding the ankles to the parts of the body that must be religiously covered. As for electronic communication between men and women, the ruling adopted a balanced position, deeming it permissible as long as it is free from arousal or desire, and does not pose a risk of leading to temptation, fitna. In this way, the fatwa attempts to reconcile religious constraints with the demands of modern communication. On the subject of dancing, the ruling was more stringent. A woman's dancing in front of non-mahram men was categorically prohibited, while a man's dancing was considered prohibited as a matter of obligatory precaution. Dancing among women themselves remains permissible, provided that the gathering does not turn into one of amusement and frivolity. In contrast, the ruling on tattoos came as a surprise to many. Khamenei held that tattooing is permissible because the ink lies beneath the skin and does not prevent water from reaching the body during ablution or ritual bathing, and therefore does not obstruct ritual purity. This position attracted particular attention among younger generations. The development of modern media, from photography to live broadcasting and satellite technology, was not merely a passing phenomenon in the contemporary jurisprudence of Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei. Rather, it constituted a new arena for testing established religious principles against technological realities unknown to classical jurisprudence. With regard to photographs and films, Khamenei maintains that looking at still images differs fundamentally from direct visual contact with people themselves. Viewing images of non-mahram individuals is considered permissible if it is free from lust, and there is no fear of temptation. This distinction reflects an understanding that a photographic image does not have the same impact as physical, face-to-face interaction. Nevertheless, it remains subject to an evaluation based on intention and consequence. In contrast, the ruling on explicit or provocative images is unequivocally prohibitive. Such images are forbidden absolutely, whether viewed out of desire or even mere curiosity, because, in this case, the image becomes a direct means of arousing instincts and opening the door to moral deviation. In the case of live broadcasting on screens, the jurisprudential stance emphasizes obligatory precaution, meaning an initial presumption of prohibition. This is due to the higher degree of realism inherent in live transmission and its greater capacity to provoke emotional and sensory responses when compared to static images. As for satellites and receiving dishes, Khamenei approached them as tools with dual potential. capable of being used for beneficial purposes as well as harmful ones. However, the ease with which corrupting content can be accessed through this medium led his ruling to generally incline toward impermissibility, unless an individual is fully confident in their own ability and that of their household to avoid prohibited material. The matter does not stop at personal use, but extends to selling, installing, and repairing such equipment. If one knows that the purpose of acquiring the device is to watch immoral channels or programs that violate Islamic law, then participating in providing the tool is considered cooperation in sin and is therefore prohibited as well. When examining the fatwas of worship and ritual purity issued by Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, one clearly observes the strict precision governing these matters. In this framework, acts of worship are not considered complete unless the legally accountable individual adheres rigorously to the rules of purity and impurity, ritual bathing, ghusl, and prayer. With regard to sequential ritual bathing, ghusl tartibi, for example, if a part of the body becomes contaminated with impurity during the process, it is sufficient to cleanse that area and then continue the ritual without needing to repeat the entire bath from the beginning. This ruling reflects a balance between maintaining ritual purity and providing a measure of facilitation for the worshipper. Similarly, concerning prayer performed while wearing impure clothing, certain exceptions are recognized, such as continuous bleeding from a wound that cannot be stopped, in which case the prayer is deemed valid due to the presence of a legitimate excuse. These fatwas also highlight rulings related to ritual impurities. A wild dog is considered inherently impure, including its saliva, a position well established in Shiite jurisprudence. Humans, however, are classified according to religious affiliation. Those who do not belong to the revealed religions are considered ritually impure, whereas followers of divine religions such as Judaism and Christianity are regarded as ritually pure. These classifications are tied primarily to the concept of ritual purity rather than to social or practical interactions. Among the more debated issues is the ruling on crying during prayer. The fatwa distinguishes between worldly crying accompanied by sound, such as grieving for a relative, which invalidates the prayer, and other worldly crying stemming from fear of God, which is permissible and even enhances the spiritual meaning of worship. Silent crying, on the other hand, carries no legal objection. This precise differentiation reveals that religious rulings are not confined to the outward form of an action alone, but extend to the intention and purpose upon which it is based. The fatwas of Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, do not stop at matters of ritual purity and worship. They extend into medical and family issues in an attempt to reconcile modern developments with the rulings of Islamic law. In the field of artificial insemination and in vitro fertilization, IVF, resorting to these technologies is permitted, provided that prohibited physical contact or unlawful gazing is avoided. It is emphasized that lineage is attributed to the owner of the sperm, the owner of the ovum and the womb, and not to the husband if the sperm is not his. Even the use of a husband's sperm after his death is considered permissible. However, the resulting child does not inherit, a ruling that opens wide debate over lineage, inheritance, and legal rights. Regarding family planning, Khamenei allows procedures such as tubal ligation for women or vasectomy for men if there is a valid medical or socially recognized reason, on the condition that no significant harm results. Nevertheless, sterilization carried out with the intention of preventing population growth is deemed reprehensible, makruh, reflecting an effort to balance individual freedom with demographic considerations. As for abortion, the ruling is strict. It is not permitted under any circumstances, even in cases of pregnancy resulting from adultery. Detailed blood money compensations, diwaya, are specified according to the stages of fetal development, from the clot, alaka, and lump, mudghah, to the formation of bones. The sole exception is saving the mother's life before the soul is breathed into the fetus. This strictness reflects the great weight Islamic law places on the sanctity of life. The fatwas also reach one of the most sensitive issues: gender reassignment. It is deemed impermissible unless scientific and customary evidence proves that the individual truly belongs to the opposite sex, or is among those classified as intersex, kuntha, whose sexual identity is not clearly defined. In cases where an individual experiences severe psychological suffering due to not identifying with either sex, there is room for the possibility of permissibility. At this point, the discussion opens onto complex questions of gender identity and legal recognition within a traditional religious framework. The book Tahrir al-Wasilah by Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, devotes particular attention and detailed treatment to the rulings of temporary marriage, nikah al-muta. It stipulates that the contract is not valid unless it is concluded through explicit verbal offer and acceptance, as mere inward consent is insufficient. It also requires that the dowry be specified precisely, by measurement, weight, number, or a clear descriptive definition that removes ambiguity, emphasizing that the contract is invalid without it. Furthermore, the fixed term must be clearly stated. If it is not mentioned, the contract is considered invalid, or, according to some juristic opinions, may be transformed into a permanent marriage. Alongside rulings on marriage, Shiite jurisprudence, as reflected in Khamenei's legal responses, addresses issues related to travel for work and the religious obligations that result from it. In response to a question concerning someone who doubts whether their travel is customarily regarded as work-related, the answer was unequivocal: fasting is not valid, and the prayer must be shortened. This position reveals the methodological precision of jurisprudence in linking the validity of acts of worship to the practical conditions of everyday life, where customary practice, urf, serves as a determining factor in defining the legal subject matter. Travel that people commonly recognize as occupational alters both fasting and prayer rulings, lifting the obligation to fast and making shortened prayer obligatory. In this way, Shiite jurisprudence, as articulated by Khamenei, does not merely present textual rulings, but integrates them into a lived framework that renders religious practice deeply intertwined with the realities of living, traveling, and working. In 2021, a controversial report circulated claiming the existence of a fatwa requiring female characters in animated cartoons to wear the hijab. The story was attributed to Iran's Tasnim news agency and was amplified by international platforms such as the New Arab and Times of Israel. However, a review of the official database of religious inquiries on the Supreme Leader's website revealed no authenticated text supporting this claim, rendering the story a purely media-driven narrative rather than an established religious ruling. Among other widely circulated claims is the alleged prohibition of wearing neckties on the grounds that they symbolize Western culture. This narrative often appears without any direct reference to an official ruling from the Supreme Leader's website, raising serious doubts about its origin. In reality, the issue of neckties tends to appear in Iranian discourse within a broader critique of Western cultural symbols rather than as an independent fatwa carrying binding religious force. This distinction highlights the difference between a social or political opinion critical of Western symbols and a formally issued, authoritative jurisprudential ruling, a difference that is frequently lost in media reporting. One of the most sensitive files concerns dealings with the Baha'i community. Media narratives often portray the matter as an absolute prohibition on any form of interaction, whereas the reality is more complex. Some jurisprudential opinions approach the issue from the perspective of doctrinal impurity or warn against religious deviation, while these views are translated at the state level into social or legal restrictions. Here, religious judgment intersects with political and security policies, making any discussion of fatwas regarding the Baha'is dependent on disentangling this overlap between jurisprudence and state authority. In conclusion, it becomes clear that Khamenei's fatwas are not purely religious rulings, but tools where Islamic law intersects with politics, shaping the contours of Iranian society, from the minutiae of everyday life to major issues such as the nuclear program. Some of these rulings are definitive and strict, while others display a degree of flexibility. Meanwhile, other narratives remain controversial due to the absence of official texts documenting them. And with that, we reach the end of today's video. Don't miss the chance to stay updated. Subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell to receive all our latest content.